It's okay, we're working on it. So hello? Put away your iPhones and your laptops. Google Play. So this weekend, we're gonna go to this guy named Foster's residence.
Move that.
I don't know, some bum they got teaching here. Because I have put a lot of green, hello. I put a lot of green stuff into my house over the years, so it's a good showplace for stuff. So the directions are here. It's you go, I guess it's west. I would want to say north, but you go up 101 towards Gavio that way, and from here, and then when you get to Winchester Canyon, it's the off ramp past the one that goes to Costco, right? Costco's Glen. The one after that's Winchester Canyon. So get off there, and it's when you get to the bottom of the off ramp, you can go right onto Winchester Canyon, but don't do that. Go straight on the surface road here. Make the first right. It's into a development, and there's a waterfall right at the entrance. If you don't do a waterfall, you're not. Little water. I want to see. And then you make a second right.
Where are you being pitching over here?
And then you make a third right, and that's. And I'm all the way around Circle 64. You can park. Try to find a pad to park with. There's not people's driveways, but there's pads in between houses. If they're all full, you can park on this main street here.
You like
Block and a half a block. And you can park.
In your help?
No, well, I'll try to leave my driveways open, but I have a pad in the driveway right there. But you can park on the street right there. It's a fire lane. It's illegal to do that, but for limited periods of time, people do it all the time.
Barbecue office.
So, no,
Building green, man.
but we can't barbecue, but we could have some pizza. You want to have a pizza party? No? Can't have beer either because it's a school, it's a class function.
After 4:45.
Well, should I guess just get pizza or not? No? Okay, I'll get some Costco pizza, okay? And then if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat it. Okay, so then after that, there's some things in the neighborhood. I want to show you some directions of solar panels. Then we're gonna go, this is real close to Costco, right? In that general area. Then we're gonna go down Hollister and turn on Stork Road, which is, what's on the corner there? Nothing. The hotel. And we're gonna go down just a few blocks toward the campus, the Stork Road. It goes left and there's a development there. And right near the corner is a pool of solar heat. I want to show you that. I think we might have seen pictures of it on the slideshow. So we'll go see it. Okay, we got a lot of stuff to get through tonight. I don't know why there's so much stuff. Usually this class is just crowded. I don't know what happened. So what's the topic tonight? What? Air barriers? Yeah, that's part of it. What's that? What is it, Robin?
So we covered some of these in the performance class, right?
Yeah. Does it look familiar? Okay, we'll go over it quickly.
Pay attention.
Yeah, so I know. Well, so we'll do insulation first. We got a YouTube. We got a bunch of YouTubes because they're doing some innovative stuff nowadays in terms of framing. Hey, shh. Hello. So first one will be on insulation, and then we'll do one on filling the cracks in homes. What do we call it? Shell sealing the shell, keeps it warm air, and then we'll do one on window, unit on windows. Yeah, so that's the second, resource conservation, energy efficiency, and then next week we'll do material saving lumber and using less wood. So we're going to talk a little bit of science, because insulation is probably the most scientific part of building now. Hey, there he is. Hi. So look at the front sheet of this. So it's often very confusing, especially when builders try to talk heat transfer. They get all felt for some reason. But heat, so what is heat? Anybody? Yeah, that's energy. What kind of energy? Yeah. Okay, good. What does that mean? What does kinetic mean? Moving. Kinetic means moving. So kinetic heat is molecules moving. Yeah, but it's not heat technically until we feel it. It's just movement. But we have cells on our skin that can feel that movement. What the movement does is it starts the cells in our hands moving, and that's how we feel the heat, the nerve cells. So same thing with the sun. The energy from the sun feels warm, right, when you sit in it, but it's not. It's just energy. It's just there's no heat or cold to energy. When it hits our skin, we feel it as heat. So we're interested in homes keeping them heated. If it's a place we need heat, there's some places in the world obviously never need heat. In the tropics, they never need heat. It's never cold enough. But the places we live in, the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, you're going to need heat in the winter. So the thing that houses would leak heat. For years, they just built houses. They tried to build them so there weren't giant gaping holes in them, right? And the windows, they tried to seal them best they could, but the houses were really leaky. And then we started, when we got blower door technology, maybe in the late 50s, early 60s, we could actually measure the amount of leakage in a house, and we could tell how much heat was going out. Then we said, well, God, houses really vary quite a bit. Some are tighter than others. So then there was a major campaign to tighten up houses and stop the heat from leaving. So we're into 20 or 30 years of this, and they've gone through a lot of things. So we're going to look at some of them tonight. What's been done. In terms of in the books, in our book and most textbooks, they'll talk about three kinds of heat transfer. Radiation, which is heat. No, radiation is not even heat. So it's not even one. The convection is actually the flow of air. Convection means moving air. It doesn't mean heat. So the only one that really is technically heat transfer is conduction. So when you have these kinetic heat molecules moving around, right? If you heat water in a pot on a stove, that fuel gets the bottom of the pan's molecules moving, which transfers. They get the water molecules above it moving. So it keeps transferring from one material to the next. The moving molecules excite the molecules next to them. So that's conduction. That's how most heat gets transferred. In a house, there's two ways heat leaks. One's conduction. The molecules in the ambient heat in the house hits the drywall, starts the drywall molecules moving, and it gets warm. It goes into the inside of the wall. If there's no insulation, it'll radiate across the opening, the air. If there's radiation, it'll conduct through the radiation slowly because there's air that slows it up. And then when it gets out, and then it gets out, and then finally it goes to the outside. So conduction is the big way that works. Convection, the movement of air, it's not just air, any fluid. Water also convects too. You know, water has layers in it, just like air does, right? Anybody fish here? What kind of fly fishing or?
Deep sea fishing.
Yeah, deep sea fishing. So there's layers of, and the fish swim in different layers, right? So you got to be aware of that. Yeah. When we have currents that have been stabilized, and then for centuries they stay the same in the oceans. But because we have all this ice melting in the glaciers in the north, there's a lot of cold fresh water joining the ocean. And it's going to really mess up all the currents because there's going to be a lot of convection going on back and forth. The currents probably won't stay the same. So these Gulf streams and all these currents that people have depended on for livelihood, because they know just what kind of fish swim in them, will change. They're already changing. There are already people whose standard fish that they fish have gone north. And they either got new fish or no fish. So that's a real problem. So convection works in the water too, probably the worst results in the water. But in homes, the warm air rises. Now, why does warm air rise?
Lighter. It's lighter.
It's lighter, yeah. So gravity has to do with it. People don't even ever ask that question. Most people don't know why. They just say
Lighter.
okay, great question. It's lighter because when it heats, the molecules drift apart, right? They move and they drift apart. Then there's less molecules per square foot, and gravity depends on the weight, the mass per square foot. So when there's less mass, there's less gravity. Less gravity, they rise. So just a function of gravity in that. So in a house, there's two main forms of heat loss. One is convection or conduction, either through the walls, through the windows. And then there's another one is convection, when there's holes in that thing. And then the hot air, all that nice air that you heated and spent money on, goes out the holes. So it either goes through holes where the heat is lost that way, or it's lost going through the walls of the house or the ceiling. Yeah. So we're gonna probably do we've got a building performance unit, just one class, down the road after the midterm. And we'll probably do some stuff either Saturday or during the night. We'll do a blower door test. And we'll see how much you guys remember. Because that's the way they measure the leakage of a house. So when you want to remodel a house and you want to close it up so it doesn't leak so much heat, you do a blower door test and it'll tell you how many cubic feet per minute are need to be replaced. And you can rate that as a very leaky, medium leaky, tight house. So why does the government want houses tight and not leaky? You want it because it costs money to heat and you're losing the heat, and it's uncomfortable. It doesn't heat. Why is the government concerned? Yeah, and why does government care about the energy? There's enough energy around, but it's we don't want to use certain kinds of it, right? And what is that? Yeah, we mostly heat with fossil fuels, and so if we have leaky houses and they leak and we heat more with it, we need to keep heating more. Then we spew more greenhouse gas. So the tighter the house goes, the better it is for the climate. So governments are concerned about that too. When we do the blower door test, you can take a infrared gun, which we may or may not do if I can get my platform working, and look into the wall and see where there's mostly the gun is made so that's a warm areas. It's like when you see on TV, the warm areas are a yellow or red, like you see in a, infrared sniper or something you see in the movies. And then the blue and green is the cooler. That's how they've coded it. So you can see, you can actually see stud bays that are blue that have no insulation in them. Or you can see stud bays that weren't put in properly and they have convection loops on the side because they're not tight. And that pretty much negates most of the insulation because, well, we'll look at this. Did we talk about that? No, we'll look at it later today. Because if there's a way, the heat always goes to cold area. Heat always goes to cold. So if there's a cold area in that stud bay, when the heat gets in there to the sheetrock, it's going to go wherever that is. So if your insulation is not tight and it's got channels on the side and the top plate's cooler, the top plate's always cooler because it's closer to the outside, the second floor, especially where there's a ceiling. That heat's going to go, wait, the cold's up and it's going to go straight up and bypass the insulation. So even if you have insulation in there, if it's not put in properly, it's going to be worthless when the heat gets in there. And we just found that out about 20 years ago. We couldn't figure out why, when the government started making demonstration houses and developments, and they put all this insulation into it, more than usual, and they didn't get better results on the use of energy. And I said, well, what's going on here? And then they finally tore everything apart and they looked at it and they realized about convection and thought, oh crap, that's what's going on.
What caused that? Wasn't it laid down like evenly or?
The insulation, well, we're going to look at it today and then we're going to do it on that day we do building performance. We're going to go and did we do that in this class? We're going to put some insulation. I gotta find out what walls Tim hasn't destroyed that I can use. We did it. Yeah, we did it because, yeah, I remember you saying there was a,
Yeah, we could just Google it.
we'll do that too. Yeah, it's pretty easy, but we'll talk about it more in a bit. There's a whole unit out of here. Okay. So, hey, get the hand out there. And I'll talk about the field trip for late people. So some of you builders or carpenters, what types of insulation are there? What shapes? Bats? What's a bat? Yeah, where does it go?
In the base.
Yeah, it goes in a stud bay, it goes in the base, right? So you have bats are pre-cut at 8 feet because that used to be standard. If you don't have a standard, you can get a bats put together in a roll. You get a roll of 16 or 24-inch insulation if you have like a 10-foot wall or a 12-foot wall. Then you can piece it, but you can also cut a roll into a whole piece. What about on insulation that doesn't? No, what about insulation that goes into stud bays that's not in one piece? Yeah, loose fill, yeah. So there's that, all different kinds of that.
You still use that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, they have fiberglass and cellulose still in bags that you can blow and dry. And those are still good. Or you can blow them in wet also. And then they have foam now that you can blow in. So foam, we'll talk about all those. It's really good to know the difference because there's all kinds of differences, price and toxicity and effect. Yeah. So, and then what else? What about on the outside of the house, outside the stud base? Manny, what about outside the stud base?
The piping? Is that what you use?
No, insulation.
Oh, insulation,
Like attic insulation?
like, yeah, when you doing foam?
Yeah, like a rigid,
Oh,
they call it rigid foam insulation, yeah. So you've got sheets of rigid insulation that you can use in various places, usually on the outside. And we'll go into that too, where it's used and why. So these next few pages on your handout have the R values, various things, so it's kind of interesting to, it's got advantages and disadvantages. These are old, so most of it's still good, but some parts of it, But notice first page is 3.2, 3.6. This is the R value per inch. So when we look at windows, we'll talk about where R value comes from. Because it comes from the inverse of the U value of the window. And we have to approach it that way. So we won't get into that until we talk about windows, but it generally means the resistance to letting go of heat. You know, it's resisting letting the heat go. So R values are given by the inch because, you know, your insulation may have different size walls, so you don't know. So these on this page are blankets and baths, 3.2, not a lot. When you multiply that by a 2x4 wall, which is 3.5, and you get, I don't know, 10 or 11. Next page, slag wool. Anybody remodeled a house in Santa Barbara and seen that gray loose fill in the attics between the joist bays?
I hate that.
Me too. That's rock. That's a slag, rock wool, loose fill. Now there's a company that's making rock wool in a bat that Rissinger, you know, that contractor we look at on YouTube a lot. He's got a whole thing on it, and I used it recently in a room trying to soundproof a room. It works really good for that too. So it's rigid. It doesn't have a great R value as other things might for your walls, but it's great for interior soundproofing. Cotton, that's like blue jeans. We'll talk about problems with some of these. Now go to page 164. It's that's going to start talking about rigid foam insulation. Okay. Now see, the first one's 4, so right away it's going up in R value per inch, and that's just polystyrene. But go down to poly, about the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down, polyisocyanurate, rigid foam board. You see that? I don't know what people call it, polyiso probably. But I used to have, when I knew where things were around here, I used to have a piece of it to show you guys. But it's got metallic what do you call it?
Foil face?
Huh?
Foil face?
Yeah, it's got the film, metallic film on one side, and it's the stuff that's you know, when if you've ever been to a nursery and they stick flowers into a pot and there's this green thing that you stick in, makes holes. That's what that is. It's the same thing. It's kind of got a rough texture, and it's the highest R value of any outside of the foam, outside of the spray foam. What's that? No, it's yellow. Yeah. I've got a piece. I used to have a piece of all this stuff, but Timmy and I have a difference of view of what demonstration means. So I used to have a classroom full of samples. I have no idea where they are. Huh?
Timmy threw away your stuff.
No, he didn't throw anything away. I don't know. I have no idea.
That's what you think. That wildfire, remember that recording?
Yeah, I can call them all
He
night.
did that wildfire where. Yeah.
In fact, I saw a piece floating around.
You're like, yeah.
See, that's what Timmy's just got everything just floating around. So.
That's because you're not organized. You gotta throw them out, they organized. There is.
I've seen it walking around. I'll get a piece for you later. But that's 8. That's an R value of 8 per inch. So that's really strong. Now, we talked about, no, we didn't yet. Thermal bridges. Did we talk about that yet? We're gonna talk about it today. So I can't do this too coherently because everything's related to everything else. So try to follow it, okay? But this is looking down at a wall, okay? And when you draw a wall from the plan view means from the top. Yeah. You need to know these terms, because when you're communicating with other people in the construction industry, they use the same language. And they do an X for the, like, you're looking down at a stud. So most fiberglass goes in the middle like this, and that's the symbol for it. It's like a wave, right? But your heat goes here and it conducts right through the wood. And wood's is a medium conductor of heat. So it'll go through there. Metal's worse, but wood's not great. That's why you have insulation and other things. So to stop that, that's called a thermal bridge, because it bridges across something thermally. Yeah, bridges heat across. So thermal bridges are the really evil thing in sustainable building, trying to get rid of that. So the first thing that people figured out was, well, let's take some of that. See, this is another thing I don't like. Oh, crap, man.
Sammy, man. Hey, we should build the reef.
I say all kinds of things about gaming. I know you're gonna look at these. What you gonna do, fire me? Oh, please. Okay. So they put the foam on the outside. Across
So where do you put the drywall? Like.
This is outside. Drywall here. So they put the foam across. That's pretty standard procedure now. And they've got all kinds of foam with OSB or plywood attached, you know. The zip systems and all that, but basically they're all trying to stop that thermal bridging. So that's something we've really learned, and they've got a lot of variations of that. And a lot of them use, well, no, it varies. If they really wanted to make it tight, they'd use polyiso because that has the highest value. You put an inch or two of that out there, and that's adding 16 to whatever else you have. So then they have, then the latest thing was the polyurethane foam, the spray foam, and they have open cell and closed cell. I don't know if we have open cell. This list may be too. Yeah, the open cell is not as good. It's like maybe 5 R value per inch. But the closed cell is 8. It's the same as polyiso, but you can spray it. And the advantage, it's also an air barrier, so air can't go through it. So you don't need to put an extra air barrier. If you're up north where you maybe put a plastic air barrier, you can just spray this foam in. And it'll be the highest insulation you can get, and it'll be an air barrier. So it's really a great product. Now, we're going to talk more about the foam. Some of these YouTubes will mention it. One of the downsides of the closed cell foam, hey, you guys. One of the downsides is that it's very toxic when it's wet. So when you put it on, you have to really gear up. You have to almost wear a hazmat suit. And the code requires you to be aware of neighbors. You can't do it where the winds, if you're doing the backyard, you can't do it where the wind's gonna, because it's nasty stuff when it's wet. Once it sets up, it's totally inert. The other thing is if it burns, it doesn't burn well, but half the crap we have in houses is horrible for the rain. So that's a problem, but it's a bigger problem than just that product. So there's pros and cons to all this. Plus that spray foam is really expensive. It's the most expensive foam. But if you want to maximize your the R value, which you don't want to do in Santa Barbara because the weather's too good. But if you're in, the north half of the United States or back east where it really gets cold, or say Montana where it's really cold, you're going to put foam in your walls. You're going to have 2x6, 2x8 walls, and you're going to fill it with foam, and you're going to have 3 pane window units. So we know how to deal with really cold weather and keep those places tight. But here, I don't think anybody would recommend spray foam in Santa Barbara City or Goleta, but North County where it's colder, it might be a worthwhile thing. But you got to balance how much money the heating is going to cost with what the foam costs, right? The foam's an expense, and if you're not going to save that much heat, and the heat doesn't cost that much, you got to weigh the balance. way up north, there's no question, it's worthwhile. All right. We have a YouTube. So you can just look these over. Oh, here's an interesting thing before we look at the YouTube. It's on, it's not numbered, but it says R value table, a couple of sheets down. It talks about the R value of everything. So it's got plywood and wood, and that's really interesting to compare. So like so a 1/2-inch drywall's got a half an R value. Bevel siding's got almost 1.8. So, this is adding up a wall here. And the assembly is the R value, the last column on the right, 1205. So everything that went into that wall. The outside air film, which I guess maybe Tyvek, the bevel side, wood siding, the plywood sheathing or OSB, the fiberglass bats on the wall, the stud, the drywall, the film on the inside if there's any. And they added all that up and they got a 12-point wall, which is not bad, right? So there is R value to the other things you put in the wall besides the insulation. And so when it adds up, well, so the fiberglass bats are 11 and it's 12, so it's only one more than the bats, but it's a lot more than the studs. So anyway, then it's got other insulated things, products on the lower table. So, if you want to know the difference between bead board and the different foam boards that you can buy, the white bead board, the blue extruded board, and this has the R value on it. So when you're going to Home Depot and you can't decide on which one you want, that'll help you. They're costed a little differently, and the cost reflects the R value pretty much. So at least it'll clue you on what you need. And the back page has got concrete materials and what R value they have, which is kind of interesting. Fiberboard, plywood. So anyway, that's just for you guys to look at. Okay, let's look at this YouTube and we'll. So this old house, anybody ever seen these shows? Did you see them back east, Robin? Oh, you're not from back east anyway, you're from up north. I don't have any New Englanders here this year. Usually I have one. And it's out of Boston, so it's a really good program though. I get it on my cable. So I don't know, if you guys ever watch TV, but if you have things, no, you don't. So they have really great issues. These guys are all professionals, and the building's a little different in New England, a little bit, but there's enough common that, and I've followed over the years. They're pretty good carpenters.
Let's talk about insulation in general. We all know that its primary metric is the R value. It talks about how
Somebody
it
hit
either
one of those
slows
lights.
or stops the transfer of heat. Right. We want to keep the heat in the house during the winter. We want to keep the heat outside of the house during the summer.
Because he always wants to go to cold.
Okay, so R value.
All right, this is saying that's right here. This is about 3.6 per inch.
So an R value of 3.6 per inch.
Right, and this is blown into the wall cavity. This is called
So
a
that-
wet blow or
Dennis,
sticky
that's
blow.
the blowing in.
Blow it through a gun, and there's a mist of water that actually mists the insulation and sticks it together and dents back into the wall.
All right, and it's really just chopped up newspaper.
Dropped out of newspaper, it's treated with a boron, and that's a fire retardant and also an insecticide.
Gotcha, okay. And this guy right here in the middle,
All right, this is a closed cell insulation,
really hard, rigid.
very rigid. Now, the R factor of this is 6.
Wow, so that's pretty high.
It's very high.
Gotcha, all right, and this guy right here?
This is an open cell, again, 3.6, 3.8,
Perfect.
all about the same. And all of the other insulations that we're gonna look at are about the same, except for this one right here.
And we blow this in, it very quickly expands, and now we've just shaved it off to fill this entire space.
Right, it goes in as a liquid, 6 seconds, it expands, you shave off the extra.
Gotcha, okay, and what are we looking at right here?
All right, this is a ground up blue jeans, It's made into a bat
Mhm.
and you just put it into the wall, the same as you would put in fiberglass insulation.
Gotcha, all right, and everyone knows fiberglass, this is very common all across the country.
Right. Now, fiberglass insulation goes into the stud bay. It should be put into the stud bay loosely, not packed in tight.
Because this is all about trapping air, so actually compacting it in there means that we're trapping less air, so you wanna actually leave it sort of fluff.
So we're gonna talk about the proper way to do it. They're not even exactly right because the way he's pushing in, it's not gonna touch the front. And it's really important that it touches all 6 sides. So he's almost there, but the one next to it, I don't know if he's gonna talk about it. Have you seen that? I don't even know if they sell that, but they started putting, all the homeowners who use insulation complained about it being, itchy and can't breathe. And so they started putting this plastic around it. But that's the worst thing you could do because that doesn't allow the fiberglass to hug the wall. The plastic gets in the way.
Will that create,
The con-
mold or humidity?
Yeah.
The plastic,
Plastic, yeah.
I don't, that's a good question. I don't know. It may be perforated on the back so air can breathe. I don't know. But I wouldn't get it anyway because it doesn't fulfill that function of being able to touch front, back, side and
But
top.
how would that be into wouldn't that be behind the wall, or are you talking about the attic? Or?
No, these are walls, but you
That
can,
that would be behind the drywall, though, correct?
yeah, yeah.
When you install it.
Yeah, we're talking about new homes or remodels where you haven't got the drywall yet.
Well, look what they go on.
Now, because air moves in this wall cavity, sometimes you want to put on an air barrier on the outside, and that will stabilize the efficiency of the insulation. Actually, will stop the air from moving inside the wall cavity, so the R factor is stable in cold windy conditions.
Okay, so let's also talk about the movement of air, because air can contain vapor. So we have to think about which way the vapor is going and how we either stop that or slow it down.
Right, that warm air, think of it as filled with moisture, and it's trying to get to that cold side back here on the sheet.
Warm goes the cold, gotcha.
So a vapor barrier right here, this is a polyethylene, you staple it to the wall, and that stops the moisture from getting into the wall cavity.
Now, you've always told us that you want to see the vapor barrier on the warm side of the wall. So down in Florida, put it on the outside, up in Alaska, keep it on the inside. That doesn't work for us here in New England because we've got both a heating and a cooling system. In the winter, we're making heat in the house and that's gonna want to go out. And in the summer, air conditioning, obviously.
Right, well, what can happen is the vapor in the winter, in the summertime, can collect on the backside of your drywall. And it can't breathe or dry out if you have a vapor barrier, but this is a vapor retarder. And it basically puts up just like the poly, but it actually allows the stud bay to breathe. So that in the summertime, the moisture that does collect back on the backside of this retarder can actually dry out because it breathes.
It's not a full barrier, it does want to work in one direction, slow.
So it's interesting. We're trying to outsmart nature and nature is just always smarter than us. So these were the problems. So in the north, if you're, heated air always is moist, right? And there's a lot of moisture in your house from people breathing and stuff. It goes into the wall. And if there's no barrier, say you live in Maine or Michigan, the moist, warm air that you've heated goes into the wall. And then the cold air from outside, say it's 0 degrees outside. The cold air comes into the wall. And if those two meet inside the wall, it reduces the temperature of the warm air, which causes it to turn to water. What's it called? Condense, right? And then it'll condense and it'll turn to water in your wall, get your fiberglass or whatever insulation wet and therefore no good, and maybe rot out your wall. So what they do is they start putting plastic, a visqueen, we used to call it visqueen, but it's polyethylene plastic, like a 10 mil, a really strong mil. And that would keep the air from even going into the wall.
What's it called again?
Polyethylene,
No, but you said you used to call it a name.
visqueen.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard that, but, and that's what he first showed, but then they started getting condensation problems with that. Because, a place like Massachusetts, a lot of places, Michigan, all the Midwest gets really warm in the summer, right? We forget that because we're thinking of it as cold and snowy. But it's got both seasons. So that hot season, the water would form in back of the sheetrock and get mold. So that it was a solution for the winter, but when you put it on, it stays for the whole year, right? And so it's going to go through all those. So now they're thinking as they put this new kind of sheet that's not quite as dense. It doesn't stop the air and water as much. It slows it down, but doesn't stop it. And that way it'll breathe and any condensation on the back will get through. But grappling with this has been a real problem. Now we're gonna look at a video later about this new machine I showed you, the aerial barrier, that's even better than, you'll see, than this. It's a really new breakthrough. But they always have problems with trying to have a year-round house that doesn't leak very much, right? And because the seasons change and there's such differences, they really have trouble figuring this out, and it's still very controversial. You look at any literature on this, and there's a ton of literature on building science. It's really pretty boring, but if you're a teacher, you read it, and it goes back and forth. There's always, people believe all different kinds of things, but you do have to have something in the northern climates to slow that air, wet air in the wall. Probably this new kind of film is probably the best they've come up with.
Oh, the vapor transfer on this side, allow it to breathe on this side.
Now, this is a sheet. You can also get it on the insulation itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so some pretty good lessons right there. Obviously, all these are gonna need a vapor barrier or a vapor retarder. What about this wall right here?
Well, because of the makeup of the open cell and the cellulose, it's dense and air can't move in it quickly, so it doesn't need a air barrier. But it depends on where you are in the country, to establish whether or not you need a vapor retardant or a barrier.
So depending on what climate you live in, you may have to figure it out. In terms of the closed cell, do we need a
Closed
vapor?
cell doesn't need a vapor retardant or a vapor barrier.
So this sounds like a really good option. It sort of begs the question, why don't we see it used pretty much everywhere?
Well, I think the biggest drawback to this is the cost. All right, this is 4 times the cost of this or even a fiberglass insulation.
Wow, so it can get really expensive.
Double the cost of this foam.
Gotcha, okay. Now, everything we've looked at right here is in an open stud base. We know that they can go, if you've got it all the way down to the studs or if it's new construction. What about a retrofit application?
All right, a retrofit, you can take this cellulose right here, not wet blow it, but blow it through the machine, through a small hole in the wall, usually 2 holes, one in the center and then one at the top, and blows through the machine and actually dense packs it into the wall cavity.
Okay,
Now, the fiberglass insulation over here, you can actually have a product that instead of it being in vats, it comes in individual pieces like this, and it goes through the same kind of machine, sucks it in through a bigger hole, like a 2 or 3 inch hole,
Yeah.
and dense packs that into the wall cavity also. Again, a double blow is important, halfway up and about a foot down from the top.
so also good for retrofit. What about the blue G? Can we blow this in the retrofit?
No, that's a bat system. It has to go into an open wall cavity.
Gotcha. And how about our foams? On the open cell, we've seen you actually pour this in through little tiny holes.
This is actually flowable or pourable. It's a faster set time. When you spray it, it's 6 to 8 seconds. When you pour it into the wall cavity, it's 5 to 8 minutes. Goes in as a liquid, sits on the bottom 5 minutes, and then grows up inside the wall.
And then our closed cell foam, can we retrofit
You
this?
cannot retrofit. It has to go into an open cavity.
All right, Thomas, this is some very good information, quite a bit of it there, but
Okay, hit the lights there, will you? So, so go thumb through your handout until you get to that page that's got those pictures on it. I used to not remember to number them because I have handouts from different places, but I forgot this time, so. Yeah. So you just gotta. So the top one, see that averaging R value for attic? So. When the building code says, hey, you guys, listen up. Hey. When the building code says it requires a certain R value in a wall, like R19 or R21, that all that means is that you have to use a bat in the wall that's R19. And it won't turn out R19 because you've got all these studs that will bring that value down. If you average in the studs, they don't hold the heat as well. And you've got windows and doors in the wall, and they don't hold the heat as well. So, but to make it simple for builders, they just say, okay, it requires you to have whatever you put in the wall has to be R19, and that kind of settles the issue. But sometimes you might want to actually figure the total R value of that wall complete. And you have to average all the things in it, the windows, the doors, the studs, the plate, and the insulation, right? So you can't just add them up. You have to, well, this shows you how to do it, and I won't go into it, but if you're interested, you can follow this averaging. You have to take the inverse of everything to add it. And the reason you do that is because windows use their R value is an inverse. It's a U value. It's 1 over R. And we'll talk about that later, but so this just has that for, so if you ever want to reference that, figure out how to do that, it's right here. There's something about thermal bridging below that. You should look at that at some point. And then keep going to this page here. It's not the greatest copying, but I'll explain it. You got that? So the top left picture. No. Yeah, the top left, I don't know, pretend it's fiberglass. Okay, so the rule is now for effective insulation. And it's not that if it doesn't go all the way up to the top of the stud bay, like it's an inch, it's not like you lose that proportion. You lose most of it if there's an inch on top. They found this out because remember I said if there's a channel and it can go up to the cold spot, it'll go up there without even going through the insulation. So it won't go through any insulation. So insulation that's poorly applied is the same as zero insulation. So it's pretty serious. So the rule is make the insulation touch 6 sides, front, back, bottom, top, sides. Got to touch all 6. Can't have a gap anywhere in there. So when you use that, when you use fiberglass that's got the backing on it, you know, the paper, you staple it, right? So when you staple that in and you fit it right, it's not going to sag at all because that staple is going to hold it in place. So to me, that's the best method to do that. Some people they used to sell bats without backing and you just stuff them in and it's a friction fit like the guy was doing with the jean stuff. That's not good because that depends on the person doing it. And if he does it and does a sloppy job, it's gonna slide down because it won't be tight enough to hold it. And those, if they drop, then you've got that same problem with convection loops in it and losing the drywall. So I don't recommend anything that doesn't have a backing that you can staple. Now you go from that. So the blue jeans, I don't think good. You know, people like blue jeans. Everybody wears blue jeans, so they tend to like that. I like blue jeans too. I wear them all the time too, but it's not a good, don't be fooled by it. It's not a good thing. And then the foams, of course, when you spray them in, they take all the room. So they're automatically touching 6 sides. So the foams are good. And like I said, they're toxic. They are expensive, but if you're living in so obviously they're going to be really expensive and not worth it if you're living in a place like here where you don't need that much insulation. You hardly need heat at all. It doesn't get that cold. So you definitely don't want to pay that money. But if you're living in where it's cold, you want to pay that money because you're going to save on savings. I mean, up where it's 20 below, your energy goes really fast and it costs a lot of money. And so you're going to pay for that 2 or 3 times the cost of that closed cell foam in a year, you know? So it's not a question there. It's only where it's warmer and you have to sort of figure that out. And it's toxic in its applications. You got to be careful. Now, if you look at the back of that page, it shows some examples of like grade C, 4.6C, grade 3. There's really big gaps. See how stuff's not even close to the top. And then the one above it's a little better, but there's still gaps. So they actually grade it now, 1, 2, and 3. And an inspector now will look at your insulation. They didn't used to. Now, when you have your house inspected, they'll come in after you do the insulation before you cover it. They'll demand to look at it. And if they see a crappy job, they'll rate it. And if it's a C, they'll tell you to do it over or to fix it. Because the government wants the houses to be efficient so they don't add to global warming. Everybody thinks it's intrusion of the government into your life. Well, it is, but there's a good reason for it. Other than something as drastic as that, there's not a good reason for it. They should leave you alone. But they can't count on people voluntarily wanting to do it. And it's a serious issue. So anyway, so that's the thing on, and one of these days when we're here, I'm gonna get a bunch of stuff together, like the lower door and that, and we'll fit some fiberglass too. Show you how that looks. Now, this last page, or go to the page that has, these framing corners. It's toward the back. So next week, we're gonna talk about saving materials other than water and warmth, which is mostly wood, right? House is mostly wood. So we're talking about ways to save wood. And there's a system called advanced framing, which has a lot of techniques where you can save wood, quite a bit of wood in a house. So we'll go through that then. But I want to mention two things here because it's also related to insulation. Advanced framing not only saves you wood because you use less, but also because you use less, it takes up less room and you have more room for insulation. So it's a double whammy good thing. And I'll just show you really quick how that works. What I do with that? Anybody see a dry erase pen around? So again, same thing, looking from above, plan view. You've got one wall and then you've got another wall that butts into it. Everybody see that? A wall always has an end stud. And then it's got studs 16 or 24 on the center from there, right? You know that because you're working in that industry or you've learned it from Tim in the beginning class, right? So the old way, and Jim still does it, and Tim would do it if I weren't around, getting on his back for doing it. But the old way was to put a piece of three, these are 2x4 walls. And they put 3 studs on the corner. And this middle one was often blocks, the bottom, middle, and top block. These were solid studs. 3 times 1.5 is 4.5, right? So this is 4.5 and a wall's 3.5, so it's stick past an inch. So then you got your drywall nailer there. So they thought it was really strong and it allowed for drywall nailer. But this is a weak place for insulation because where does the warm air go? To the coldest place. What's the coldest place in this corner? Where all this wood is. This is all wood. It's going to just bypass the insulation, go right to that corner and out of your house. So they said, okay, well, that corner won't work. So then they said, okay, so what can we do? Can you see this okay from out back there?
Yeah.
So they said, okay, you got to have the 2 ends up. What else? And they said, well, what if we just put a piece this way, same size, and that allows for your nailer, for your drywall to nail to, and then it's a lot more room in there for insulation. The problem is, when you put insulation in, it goes like this. You know, insulation it's not like jelly, it's kind of rough. And guess what this is? Yeah, this is an airspace, it's an airspace that's the air is gonna go to and up and out. So that doesn't work. So it was a great idea while it lasted. So then they've been trying to figure out what to do. And then somebody came up with this great idea called drywall clips. And I looked everywhere for them. I don't know where they are. I gotta look some more. But when we had that day here, I'll have them to show you the little clips. And they nail into the stud here. So they nail on the back of this and they stick out this way, right? They nail right into this wood. They're little metal clips and they stick out. So then here's the stud. So when you put your drywall on, you put this piece on first, nail it to here. And then it fits against that clip. It doesn't nail into the clip, but it can't go into the wall. Then when you put this piece of drywall on, it pins it against that clip. And then this piece gets nailed into that end stud. So you don't need any wood in there to nail with these clips. That's pretty nice, right? Look at all that insulation in there. So you're not even so there won't be an area here where the warm air will sneak out. So this is hard to get builders to use because they've been doing it that other way for 50, 100 years. Jim Cunningham used to teach here, exactly my age. We framed in LA at the same time. We didn't know each other, but we came up the exact same way because that's what people did. They did the same. And they frame in a real solid way. It feels great. It's real solid. You don't need that solidity that's way overbuilt. And the engineers have said, no, you don't need that. So when they cut this back, they realized that that's as strong as needed. Plus it has all that room for it. But the drywall clips, you either have to put them on, which is one more job, or you have to have your sheetrocker do it right. You have to train them or find someone who does it. So it's a little bit of an imposition, but builders are so, well, you know, there's so much at stake. They can't waste any time. You know, the profits aren't that big that you can just fool around. So anything you can cut a relearning exercise, you know, re-educating, you do. So you stick with old ways because it's cheaper that way. You don't have to retrain people. But I really wish people would start using the clips because it really is going to allow much more insulation value to walls. They really work. It's such a novel idea, you know, that people get scared of it. So same thing with you know what a channel is? You know what a channel is? In a wall. So it's where an inside wall meets an outside wall. And the reason they call it a channel is because there's a channel inside it. So they build this 3-part C. It's a channel. And here's a drywall nailer for this wall. Here's a drywall nailer for this wall. This spaces them. This is the same size as this wall. So this spaces them in the proper way. But you're losing a lot of insulation space. And when do they insulate in a house? After the exterior siding? Yeah, because they don't want to put it into a house that's open to the weather. So once you put your siding across, how are you going to get insulation in there? You don't. So
You put it on before you put your.
a conscientious builder would put it on before, and I would put rigid in there because that was waterproof. So it could rain away. I didn't care. So you can fill this with rigid and forget about it. That's one way. You still lose this value. So you can use drywall clips here too. I know they're on the end of this. Same way, and you can put drywall against it, and pin it with put these pieces on first and then pin it with these pieces. So that's part of advanced framing, and there's a lot of other techniques, and all together you can save a lot of lumber and price on homes. In our book, there's I'll find it later. There's a page that shows a comparison of advanced framing, and it'll probably be in the framing chapter, right? Which one's that? I'll find it and show you later. And it does a cost comparison of this one house in Colorado, and it's significantly cheaper. The amount of wood saved. And then you get the extra boon of more fiberglass. Okay, that's all for this one. Now, there's some new things. Let's go to 7:30. There's some new things.
Are you looking for a new fence or gate for your home or property?
No.
Type in your address and drop the red thing to create a perimeter on the inside of the fence. Boom!
Hello everyone, welcome to sounddesign.com. A standard stud wall versus a double wall for soundproofing. Sounds straightforward process, but there are
So they're doing this for soundproofing because just like a thermal bridge, there's a sound bridge too. So no matter what you do to a wall, if you have studs that touch the outside material on both sides, sound's gonna go through it. You can put all the stuff you want on it, but it's not gonna do it. You've got to actually break that somewhere. So this is about sound, but I got it because it has some pictures of. So this is funny because one of these things talks about a double wall as if it were new, but when I lived in Maine in the early 80s, it's 1980s, last century, we built double wall things all the time. But they're coming back, and I think they're great. But there's a couple things you can do to stop thermal bridging or on the inside sound bridging. You can have a 2x6 plate or bigger, like 2x6, and then put the stud. Stagger the studs inside and out. So that this is 24 on center, regular outside layout, and then this is 24 on center. And none of these, no stud is continuous from inside to outside, transfer heat or sound. So that's one way to do it. And then you can just spray in insulation behind that or different things, and they'll show this. The other way is the way we used to do it. Now it's just to build two walls. So this is maybe a foot. And these can be 2x4 walls if you're not meeting the actual.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think I left my backpack here yesterday.
Done.
That might be it over there. in a bit.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe
come on,
grab
come on, sure.
it. Sorry.
You got it? Oh, great.
Thank you.
So this is two separate walls on the outside of the house. This is the outside one, this is the inside, and the stuff, it doesn't matter if they line up or stagger because they're separated. And then you blow in insulation into this whole thing, so it fills the stud bays on both sides and the center part, so you've got a foot worth of insulation. Which is out there is nice in cold country. And it makes it real soundproof too. The places are like Adobe places, like just so quiet, because nothing comes through that. So what do you do with doors and windows? You gotta put a piece of plywood that spans that, for the window, a box. So a little bit of extra stuff. And of course, you're twice as much frame material. But we're talking in a cold place where you're gonna pay more money somehow. If you blow in, foam is gonna be expensive. You do double wall, no matter what you do, that's part of the living in cold country. So this is gonna, if this is no good, I'll shut it off. I can't remember which one it is.
There are several methods to take into consideration depending on each situation. For those who are trying to save a little bit of money and not try to pull anything too complicated off, there are just two methods to consider. There is per use.
Yeah, let's get rid of it.
run. The most typical setup is having 2x staggered wall construction, built this
Oh, there
type
we
of construction.
Yeah.
While the goal of this process is there will be an added air cavity that helps with isolating sound with staggered
Or heat.
studded construction. The air cavity will help absorb the sound coming through the wall. And although it might not seem like much,
So this is relatively new because in single family residences, the social feeling was that there wasn't a need to soundproof the rooms. Of course, we have all these stories of people growing up with their parents making a lot of noise in the bedroom, you know, and,
Why?
you know, for various reasons, and then Johnny playing his music too loud, so we've always complained about lack of soundproofing, but we've never seemed to do anything about it. So now, you know, with people that have more money to spend on these, they're figuring out ways to actually, on the inside, to separate the sound, you know? In my house, my son's bedroom was right next to the master bathroom, and then our bedroom was on the other side. And he said he could hear us talking in the bathroom, you know? Nothing bad, but he could hear our voices and it would keep him awake at night. So we'd go to bed later, so it was just, I don't know what it was just cheap, you know, walls. So I took the walls off and put that, I put a bridging across it, a big, well, we'll look at this type of insulation that's really kind of thick, and it really helped, it really did the trick. So it's something to think about now, you know.
I believe, they make, some sort of board, foam board that you can just screw into the wall and right wall it and. that
Yeah.
will do that. You don't have to-
That's kind of what this is, except it's rock wool, but it's in a bat form and it's kind of rigid, so you can screw it in, similar kind of thing, yeah. You just take the sheetrock off and do it and put it back.
Well, you just put on top of the shoe.
Oh, on top of the sheetrock, yeah, oh, yeah. I wish I would have known about that.
You have to find the bats and then you
Yeah,
just mud over it.
yeah. Oh, that's good.
Actually,
Yeah. So. See if we can get see a picture of a double wall. There it is. So you see that?
With a gap, the thickness of the wall.
So let's see if they have to do something about the door.
The bigger the gap, the wall, like, I've been around for a while, and there's enough data out there to make a sound decision on what works.
So. So they're trying to come up with ideas for thermal, that stop thermal bridging, right? That's been, so all these so far have been attempts at that, and here's yet another one that I thought was exotic, and then Rissinger, that contractor, got a hold of it, now he's touting it, so we'll see. But he said, but first, this woman's gonna
This is the
drive.
first bathroom that we're currently renovating. Our home was built with traditional wood framing members like studs, headers, topped with a thermal bridge. In this video, we're going to compare a traditional wood stud and a T-stud in terms of dimension, performance, feasibility, and price.
So this thing called a T-stud, any of you ever heard of that or used those? It's a two studs, they're turned sideways to each other and they've got a little piece that holds them together, so. I don't know how much, we'll look at what she says for a second.
Thermal bridging is the flow of heat by conduction through the studs in a building. Bare naked T-studs stop the flow of heat because of a gap between the flange and spline. The gap in between is
Well,
approximately
they don't stop it
1.5
completely
inches.
because it's connected.
Wooden dowels are installed through one member and into the other at opposing angles, forming a web-like pattern. There are several types of T-studs, a 2x3 flange and 2x3 spline, which is
So this
2.5
total
inches
distance,
wide,
yeah.
5.5 inches deep.
Would fit into a
It's
2x6 wall.
replacement. A 2x3 flange and a 2x4 spline, which is 2.5 inches wide and 7.25 inches deep. It's a 2x8 replacement. T-studs can replace most framing members like wall studs, top plates, bottom plates, act as a thermal break and reduce moisture accumulation in walls. T-studs are 4 times stronger than traditional studs, which fail in the x-axis if there's too much load on it. T-studs don't behave the same way because they are turned 90 degrees. They don't deflect or fail in the x-axis. While a 2x4 can hold 900 pounds and a 2x6 can hold 2,200 pounds, T-studs can hold 8,600 pounds. In addition to reducing thermal bridging, the gap in T-studs is a huge advantage for running utilities. The base
Yeah, you don't have
plates
to
in my
drill
home
holes.
have ridiculously large cutouts for drains. Wall studs are also damaged to run electrical wires. Instead of hacking through perfectly good studs, we can run PEX pipe and wires through the gaps in T-studs. In this way, we won't compromise the structural integrity. If you need to run larger PEX pipes, you can cut an inch from the inside stud, but not the outside stud. Installing T-studs is very similar to nailing traditional studs, so there is a minimal learning curve associated with it. One thing that's different is fastening T-studs to the ground. Instead of just a threaded J-bolt or lag bolt, you need a wide plate that straddles the two wood studs and transfers its fold-down power. Before we move on to the cost of T-studs, I'd like to introduce the sponsor of this portion of the video, Roofing for US. Roofing for US.
Now, she
is the
never goes
leading
on to give the price comparison. She just says they do other things that, you know, mitigate the price.
Is that really a thing though? Or is that something you look at going out with or?
I'm sorry, what was that?
That's something you look at going out with or? Cause I've never really seen that at a construction site. Or is that just something like in? Like.
And I'll show you, I've got another, let me show you. Well, it's new, but, you know, this guy, Matt Rissinger. Well, if you took the C-24, you've seen him, but.
Capable of universal functioning mechanism for metal infantry posts. On the build show today, one of my favorite topics, framing. Now, about a year and a half ago, I made a video about a new kind of framing with an insulated stud. This is called a T-stud. Today's video, we're using a whole
You guys.
type of T-stud called the bare naked T-stud. Now, this is a truss stud that replaces 1-to-1 a 2x6. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to get into a lot of details. We framed the entire house with these T-studs. Today's video is sponsored by T-stud. Let's get going. But actually, these are 3 times stronger in compression, continuous insulation.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure how valuable that is, because if you're gonna build multiple stories, you're not gonna use these kind of studs. It's gonna be, you know, a different kind of construction. So that's one of the things they tout, but you know, for 1 and 2 story and even 3 story, sometimes residential framing, we've got along with regular studs, right? And they're much less strong than these T-studs, so I don't consider that a really important.
Change. But honestly, it was our first
The
time.
thermal
doing it.
bridging.
You brought the idea up and I thought, well, yeah, let's give it a try. It makes a lot of sense. For many different reasons. And for us, in the way that we did, we approached it on this particular frame job. It wasn't much change at all, and we actually like them.
And tell me about straightness. You know, I know people are wondering how straight are these? What happens if you get crooked ones? What did you find? Did you find a lot of coal in the pile or no?
Actually, no, we were concerned about.
Yeah, most things that are
that.
engineered end up being straighter, so.
When we were helping unload these things and stack them, we thought, oh man, he's gonna stay straight for us. And you know, we had to keep him under power for a little bit. Here, it's just that the flange in the middle.
I'll try to find out
That's right. So
the
if you look
cost of.
down on that header, you can see we've got 2-inch foam in between to our top plate. Now, to combine these 2 members, and then this is going to give you that structural integrity. Of course, you could also lace in a full size one, top to bottom, but no need to do that. You could probably go 2 feet
These are
top
just
and
framing
bottom of that.
details, let's not take time to look at those. I thought this thing, what would a corner look like with these things?
Okay, this is your option that you have today. This is what, like literally all builders do today, okay? They use this much.
Do all
buffer
builders do that
that's what
today?
they pass together
Boo.
today. You can see all of the places.
We just got through saying that's not good enough.
It just travels right through that, all the framing members like a hot pipe of butter, okay? So we take this and we throw this away.
So you gotta have an end stud.
Here's
That
the
one's,
layout.
So these two make
Bare
sense.
naked T-stud, bare
You
naked
don't need
T-stud.
this if you use clips,
Here's
so
going to
you
do
get
the
rid of
corner.
this piece.
Okay, so this is the corner all finished.
Come on, get rid of it.
Then I'm
Come
gonna
on.
take it apart for you, right?
Come on,
So
get rid of it.
Run your
You can do it. Oh, darn
studs this way, run the studs
Come on.
that way.
it. Come on.
I turned this bare naked T-stud around this way so I could nail it together
Take it out.
easily with a 3.5 inch nail gun,
Hey, you.
okay?
Take
When
it
you-
out. There we
when
go.
you-
Ah.
You're gonna have a little harder time. with it. Because
Okay, you don't need that. But anyway, so that'll work with those. I'll find out the cost. If it's outrageously expensive, like 2 to 3 times as much,
This will already be.
it might be worth thinking about. But if it's you know,
All at the bottom and at the
if it's
top.
reasonable,
So
it'll
you
be
gotta
more, but if
put
it's
this thing
reasonable, it does
together.
have those added
So I
benefits
would
of
just go grab.
breaking the
screws
thermal
and
grid.
screw it together, suck it up tight. Okay.
Okay, let's take a break. 10, 15 minutes. Come on back. So. Gotta remember what I used to do. They trust teachers, so you can pretty much BS them while you're there. They shouldn't trust people. Oh, actually. they should. First day of attendance. Okay, so let's say you were here. When did this, when did this? Got it right here. August 31st. So let's say you came September 7th. Yeah. Minus 23 months. Must have attended during the first 2 weeks. So that's the second. Is that the second? Yeah. Instructor name, please print. But you used to have to have a reason.
I think that's the fear.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what you want me to put.
No,
for
no,
the
that's right.
reason.
That's good. Yeah. 'Cause I usually. Yeah, this is where we have to be. So, okay. And so here in the date. Okay, I think that's good. I don't mean, I know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think if you just sign it and date it and turn it in tomorrow if you can. Now, admissions on campus has Friday, in the last few years, they've been curtailing their hours. So you might want to call and find out when they close. They may close at like noon.
Okay.
So, and I think it'd be really good if you got it in, you know.
Yeah,
You think you can?
I think I could.
Okay.
Do
Do you know where the admissions office is?
no,
Do you know the school phone number?
I can find it. But
Okay.
do I need a
Call the school
an
and
ad code from you?
no, not for this.
Okay.
Let me give you an ad code just in case. You know, it won't
Yeah.
be any harm to do it, but I don't think at this point, you know, it's beyond that.
All right.
took those out. Okay, hold on. I was done with that part, so. Let's go to here. Oh, you know, they got this stupid,
Oh, like the, yeah.
second factor login now. Drives me crazy. I don't know, I guess it's really good, right? It's probably students that are hacking in there. You know, anyway.
Yeah, that's probably why they put it up.
And let's see what I want. Okay, so let's do the, well, let's do the second one. You know, when they have O's or zeros, I don't use them because kids get fouled up.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell a zero from an O. So XRF K12. You got that?
Yep. That might
XRF.
be I2. It looks like it has the.
Yeah, let's go to the BFF SMQ one. You can cross it out there.
Yeah. The BFF SMQ.
Yeah, then those have no. These problems. I know, you know, 1 and I and
Yeah.
0 and O. Okay, so, and, here, write down on, not that. Do you have a piece of paper or something? Here, I have a pad. I got something right here. So call me. If they give you any trouble. Or you can or something, call me, I'll be at home, I'll answer. And maybe I can talk the person through if it's getting weird. Okay,
All right, thank you.
yeah, so I think that'll work.
Right.
And let me know, like, if they say, I don't know what they'll say, but if they say, I don't know, I mean, maybe there's nobody there and they want you to come back Monday, but really try to do it tomorrow.
Yeah,
But
I'll
if
try
you
to do
can't,
it tomorrow.
if you can't, let me know and then we'll,
I have a meeting in the morning at like 9, but I should be able to go after that.
okay, okay. And, so you got those handouts, let me give you. Now, here's the thing, I don't have a syllabus with me today. The test, we just have a midterm and final,
Okay.
and I prep the week before,
Mhm.
and I give you like most answers, well, I don't give you answers, but we go through it.
Yeah.
So don't worry about not getting going over these in class. Because I'll tell you what's gonna be on it, but look at these anyway. And see what you can make of them. That was last week, and then the first week was the syllabus and some other stuff, and I'll give you that, I don't have it here.
Yeah.
Next week, okay,
Thanks.
yeah. How do you know those girls from?
I'm in the Tuesday class with them.
Oh, you've got the other, oh, that's
Yeah,
right, you've
yeah.
got the other construction.
Yeah.
Are they, what's her name?
Jennifer and.
Is Jennifer taking other classes doing construction?
Yeah, she's in the, I think she's just in the Tuesday.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
I
then-
know Chelsea's got a bunch of them too.
Yeah, she's in the Wednesday as well.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay.
This is a camera Lucifer, and for the whole of the 19th century, it was the indispensable drawing aid for great masters and tech.
We're back over here in our Newton project. Now, it is pretty traditional, almost all of our projects, we do the different heat, it's a small upcharge in the project like that.
You know, it's not often that I can cross from.
Has it been 15 minutes? Not even sure. Damn.
Wait, weren't you guys building something?
Yeah.
For 3 weeks?
Oh, no.
Oh, you were?
Sorry, I know what happened. Yeah.
When you guys go through me?
Yeah, we got fucked it up, bro.
Videotape, they're saying we wouldn't want to.
Like 7 feet? Really? They were like 6 feet.
No, that wasn't us.
Actually, those ones were there, we had, you know, once the.
Nah, good.
The camera wasn't good now. You guys building a business for it? Yeah. It's hard, that's right here.
Okay, so take out your textbooks. You are reading the chapters ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
You can tell by the order how much I read.
So, go to 112 in the text. You can just share with one else. Until they. So you should read these chapters. There's stuff in here that I don't mention because there's not enough time to do both, but there's one thing I want to talk about briefly is insulating the edge of ceilings and roofs. So on 112, the top picture section is of an ordinary house with a truss. And see how above the wall, the insulation gets kind of compressed and stuffed in there? And that's not good because, well, there's not enough room. So when you compress insulation, it doesn't go to the size you compress it. It goes somewhere between that and the regular size, but you're losing insulation. So what they did for trusses is they made what's called a raised heel, the bottom picture. And if you look at across the page on 113 is an actual photo of it. See how it's got a little thickness to the end there? They put the one coming down on top of it instead of signing off at an angle. And they can get full insulation all the way into the edge of the building. That's really important. If you site built, so you're framing without a truss, you don't have that advantage, although you can, when your joists run across the wall, put a plate on the joist and run the rafter on top of that plate. Instead of next to the joist on the top plate, if you put a plate on top of the joist. How about a picture, huh? That's what some people are doing now when they're not using the truss. So here's the joist on top of the wall, yeah. And then normally you put a rafter that would come down and rest on this plate here, right? You go between the joists, you nail onto the joist. That doesn't give you much room to insulate, but if you put a plate on top of the joist, another top plate, and then you run the rafter onto that, you still got all that room where the joist was, put insulation. So you can do it site framing too. Okay, that's it for that. There's other stuff, but I'd rather have you just read it for now. So the second handout, we don't take a lot of time on. But so what were the two ways that warm air, that your house loses heat? Convection. And what is that? Conduction and convection. What does that mean? Describe that process in the house.
Conduction, like if there's material that's like touching all the way through the wall, and the heat just
Yeah.
goes out.
So we use insulation stuff to stop it, right? And so what's the other one? The other way of losing heat? Convection. That just means a hole going through holes, not going through the wall, just the air. So it's not the heat that's disappearing, it's the air that holds the heat. That's what convection is. It's really an air change. It's not really heat, but the heat's in the air. So it goes, if there's a pressure difference on the outside, the inside, which there always is, and then you have leaks, holes, pressure just sucks that air out with all your conditioned heat or cool losing money. So those two ways. So this sheet is how to plug some of the holes in the shell. And these are all handouts. Some of the vocabulary is different, but it just gives you various things you can buy at anywhere, Home Depot, to cover holes. You know, plumbers and electricians often leave bigger holes than you'd like in the framing. And so there's various things here showing how to plug various things. On page 7, it shows you different areas where there could be leaks, including the electrical box. You know, because that penetrates, that goes into the wall, and they could be sloppy in putting that on. Could have leaks around it. So outlets, vents, opening, all kinds of things. Any of you have furnace? We've talked about this. I've asked you. Any of you have heating furnaces inside the house, like in a closet? They used to do that, and then they said, well, that's not fire safe, we'll put them in the garage. Now they're mostly in garage. But if you go to a lot of old houses, they're in actually a closet that's got louvered door. And often the way the pipe goes up through the wall, it's often a big hole like that, like they just took an axe and made the hole. And so that's really got to be done. And the way they do it is they take a piece of metal and they cut it in half and cut a hole in it, and then they can put those pieces, or you can just cut one and bend it around the pipe. There's various ways, but those are really useful things, because you've got to plug those holes. They're gonna cause you damage. So all the rest of the pages have various places that need attention. And you know, the more you know about construction and framing, the more you'll be able to find those places. Crawl space under a bathtub. You know, bathtubs are lower than the floor, the plumbing, and sometimes there's just giant, they just take big holes out of that sheet of plywood to get the plumbing and everything. And you know, that just means all that cold air is gonna come up next to the bathtub. So that's really an area that's abused a lot, and you've got to find a way to plug it. Obviously, it should be done when you're building the house. Then the rest of it talks about various types of caulking. Oh, on page 20, go to that. It's the written in 20 with a circle around it. You can find that, yeah. There's the backer rods. We haven't talked about those in here, right? So if you put caulking, if you have a big crack, pretty good size, 1/4 inch, 3/8, you put caulking there, it's no good because it's so wide, the caulking will dry out and pull away. It'll either split in the middle or pull from the sides. So you don't want to do that. So they make these foam backing rods you can get at Home Depot. Again, I usually bring those in and show everybody. I'll show you on a weekend. They have different sizes and you put them into they're long pieces and you put them into those places you're going to caulk. And then you only have a little bit to caulk up against that and then it won't split. So those are really useful. And that's important. You know, people used to caulk like crazy around things and then walk away, or the painter would do it and then walk away. 5 years down the road, all this stuff would dry out and big cracks and openings, you know, nobody there to take responsibility. So they're trying to make sure that doesn't happen by doing it right the first time. And you just have to know that caulking can't stay in a big giant area. It'll shrink, it dries out and shrinks. You know, they keep extending the life of caulking, right? It goes from 10-year to 20-year to 30-year. But if it's put in wrong and it's too big and it cracks, then that's going to negate that 30 years. It's going to be more like 5 years. So you got to do it right. For outlets and switches, they have those, like I said, they have those gaskets, they're foam. Anybody seen those? You know, they don't push it anymore, but that's one little more thing you can do. And anybody can do it. Your kid can do it. Just take the cover plate off and put the one that fits into it and put it back on. It's all you do, and it stops that whole leaking. When we do the blower door test, I go to the switches and you can see how much air, you know, I have a little smoke stick and the air just goes right out those outlets. So, and then the next page shows how to put it. They make them for double, you know, fourplex outlets and everything. So, and then the last bit, I'm going to let you look at on your own, but it's just, I got this off the website from Home Depot and it's pretty good. It explains all the different kinds of sealants. You know, it's the caulk versus sealant and the silicone versus the water-based. So it's pretty informative. So take a look at that. It's really pays to know what kind of sealants or caulking work for what. They're very particular and they've got chemicals in them that aren't compatible with some things you put them on. So it's a whole science and you've got to know what you're doing or you're going to do a crappy job and it's not going to work. Yeah. Okay, put that one away. But read it at home. Okay, last handout. So why do we put windows in the same unit as insulation?
Windows have to be insulated?
Yeah, it's another place for heat to go out of the house, yeah? Windows and doors. So you've got a wall, 2x4, it should be 2x6 now. They call 2x6 walls, hey you guys, they call 2x6 walls advanced framing because in warm places they've been used to 2x4 walls, but you can't get the legal amount of insulation in 2x4 wall anymore. So if you use a 2x4, Jim always loves 2x4 walls, but I lived in Maine for 10 years. In the 80s, even then they were using 2x6 walls. They couldn't get insulation in 2x4 walls. So if you use a 2x4 wall now, you have to put insulation in it And then you have to put foam on the outside to, but, to add to it. Make sure it goes to code. I think 2x6 walls are better, but the wood costs more. But a 2x4 wall, you can only space 16 inches because the strength is not enough. But a 2x6 wall, you can go 24 inches, so it almost makes up for the price, about the same actually. So you're not really losing if you go with 2x6, and you can get all that more insulation, so you save on heat bills. This first page, we're gonna go through characteristics of windows, and windows are really, the government's really made standards for windows too, because they know it's a place where you can lose heat, and they're interested in not burning more heat than you need to. So look at the R value in these, single glass, not even one. Here you've got an R19 wall. I think, what's the minimum wall now? Anybody know? R19? It's somewhere around that. It changes. R20. R21.
I
R21?
think I started seeing.
It might go to 21, somewhere 19 or 21. Every year it changes. So we're talking 19 or 20. This is 0.9. So one piece of glass doesn't insulate very much, right? Okay, now, when they say standard insulated glass, they mean double pane. Why they don't use common English, I don't know, but double pane, it obviously twice as much, too, a little more than twice because it's got that airspace. So now you can't put single pane windows in a house. The code won't, I mean, you can do it if you bootleg it, if you don't get a permit. But if you get a permit, there's no such thing as a single pane anymore. Then if you've got low E glass, which we'll talk about, it's a metal coating they spray on one of the four sides or two of the four sides. That boosts it up another to 3.3. And then triple glazed with two low E coatings is 8.3. So that's getting closer to a wall, right? So that's Montana style, triple glaze. They pay a lot of money for these massive windows, but that's what keeps the cold out. The unfortunate thing about triple glaze, and we'll look at in a second, is every pane of glass reduces the visibility, right? Because visibility is the light, and it blocks light. It's usually blocking ultraviolet or infrared, but it gets the visible light too. And so it looks a little bit less, a little grayer, and you get three panes, and it's starting to get. So you're in Montana, and you got this beautiful view of the Bitterroot Valley, but you got to have triple pane glass, so you're not seeing it quite as well. So it's the trade-off. But you don't want to freeze your ass off up there. So next page, every window you buy from Home Depot or any window company has a sticker on it, and it's put on by the National Fenestration Rating Council. So how many have heard that word fenestration? Not even the guys in C-124 raise their hand. I'm insulted. Doors. Okay, you saved it, Liz.
Yeah, you gotta give other people a chance. You can't answer all those questions, man. Not fair, right?
So, Ventana is the same word. It's just the difference between Spanish and French. Fenestra is French, Latin is like fenestrato or something, so they're all similar. They would mean window. The building code has included doors because they have to do some with doors, so they're part of fenestration, but fenestration means windowing. In the old days, it was how the windows were arranged. Cathedrals had real specific fenestration. But know that word because it's used in the building code. And it's used in construction. They don't find a simpler word. So you don't want to see that and go, what does that mean? It looks stupid. So, but in the building code, that's what they call it. Anyway, National Fenestration Rating Council rates all manufactured windows. And they rate it for 3, sometimes 4 or 5 qualities. And we're going to look at all those qualities right now. So the thermal let's see, I got a list here. Let's go to that list. Oh yeah. 3 pages in, it's just it looks like this, okay? It's just a type page. You guys in the back table, go to It's the type page, you there, it's not numbered. Starts with U value at the top.
Oh, yeah.
You see that? Okay, so these are all the qualities of windows that the government requires Windows to have and that have to do with how Windows work. So U value is, we've been talking about R value for insulation. So U value is the reciprocal of that. So if you have an R20 wall, what's the U value?
1/20.
Which is,
0.5, 0.05.
oh, good.
Alright.
Is that right?
No, double check that.
So everything is R valued except for Windows. And there's reasons for it, but it makes it more confusing for everybody, but. So R value, you want to go up, right? The higher the R value, the more resistance, the better heat saving. Since it's the reciprocal, it's the opposite. So for the U, you want lower value. You know, 0.05 is better than 0.5. Got it? So if you work with U values a lot, it becomes easy to do that like R value. But if you don't work with it like none of us do. But anyway, so that's one value of the window, how much it actually insulates. So it'll have the U value on the window. There's another, and we'll look at the sticker. We'll go back and look at the sticker and show you where those are written on the sticker. Solar heat gain coefficient. So heat gain is obviously how much heat it allows in. And that's mostly, there's three components to light. We talked about that? Yeah, we did, because we talked about daylighting and passive solar, right? So what are the three types of light wavelengths? Infrared, visible light, and UV. Those are the three main ones. And visible light has some warmth to it too, but not as much as ultraviolet. So a lot of times we don't want that heat because it's going to heat us up too much. If you're in a place where you're using passive solar, then you do want that heat, but you got to have the thermal mass to absorb it, right? But otherwise, if you're in Santa Barbara, we don't need to keep heat. It never gets that cold. So we don't want the heat to come in. We don't want to have the house be hot. So we want a low solar gain coefficient. Air leakage, they don't have a code on that, but most window companies make relatively good leakage because they're competing with each other. And if one company gets the bad rap that the windows are really leaky and so the government doesn't have a requirement for that. They just list it as something you should know about. Visible transmittance is how well you can see. So if you have E coating or mini panes, it cuts down on the visible transmittance. You don't see as well. So that they post on there too. And then they'll put low E coatings, which we'll talk about, low emissivity coating, which is a metal that's sprayed on that reflects heat, keeps heat out or keeps heat in, depending on where you put it. And then sometimes when you have double or triple pane, they put a gas instead of just the air that's there when they manufacture it. They'll actually shoot in a krypton or argon gas, which actually adds a little bit of insulation value to it also. So let's see where those are on the sticker there. Get back to that sticker. You know, Windows can be a pretty good part of your home, right? The more money you have, the more big windows you have, I think, but still. And you know, when you're trying to save energy, they become one of the issues. So look at this window here, World's Best Window Company. Obviously, it's not a real. Right, this page at the beginning, it has that sticker. So if you go into a window store, Home Depot, every window will have the sticker on it. So it's got residential and not, I guess residential, non-residential, I don't know what that means, but look for residential. It's got a U factor of 32, right? 0.32. So what is 0.32 in R value? Come on, who's the whiz who got that before? Three?
Talking about, man.
Is it three?
Isn't it, 3.2?
One over 3.2?
One over 3.2. Come on, bro. One over 3.2? I'll sound it out.
Oh, that's 0.3, right? Hey, anybody got a calculator? And divide 1.3.
125.
1.3?
125. 0.3, 125.
Throw a decimal in there, that's crazy, dude. That's like.
So that's a third, right? Is about. Okay, 0.3 we'll say.
Better get it right, if you want watching, man. You're trying to 0.32.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. You're right. 0.32, so that would be 3, right? Okay, so you value 0.32, which is what this says. I transferred it wrong. Would have an R value of 3. So that's pretty good for glass, right? Double pane is usually 2, so this has, probably this has some, things that are bringing it up, like, well, let's see what it has. So then you have, the second one is solar heat gain. That's 0.45, and they go, it's 0 to 1, so that's like an average amount. And then what's that, their visual transmit, 0.58. So obviously this has got something, double glazed argon fill low E, see on the description of the window? We know it's double glazed, so it's got argon and it's got low E glass, that's what's cutting down the visible transmittance and also the heat gain. And then air leakage, which they don't have a standard, they don't have a required standard for, it's 0.3, I'm not sure, you know, they're different. The percentages are have different meanings. There's more on that, the next few pages describing those. Let's go to something else. Oh, yeah, so, you know, that list of qualities we went to, go to the back of that page. Where it says windows and code. Everybody there? So this is for when you have to use tempered or what's the other one? Safety glass. Right? You've heard of that. Anybody know the difference? Yeah, one shatters and one crumbles. I guess that's the way to put it. So when ordinary glass breaks, it breaks in big shards. It could be like this big pointed. And if they went across your throat, you probably cut your jugular and you bleed out. So people have died from glass hurting them. So the industry got panicked about that a while back. This is not new stuff. This is maybe 50 years old. So they made this tempered glass, which is only breaks in, if you've ever broken a tempered glass, it just starts cracking in the little tiny pieces. So nothing comes out to cut you. You can get cut by handling it or touching it, but it won't cut your body. So it's safety glass. So the law requires that to be used in an area where it might get broken easily. So your front door slams, and if you have glass right up next to the door, it might break that glass. So, what's the code? Side lights, that's what they call the glass next to the door. It has to be within, if it's within 12 inches of the door, it has to be safety glass. Right? So you might have a space of 3 inches, but it's still within that 12 inches. So you've seen the doors and have those side pieces of glass. That was big for a while. It's not in vogue right now. Windows within 24 inches of a door. Any glass less than 18 inches from the floor. So if you have a piece that's lower than, most windows are 30 inches, right? But if you have something lower than 18, why does that need protecting?
Kids.
Yeah, you got little kids and dogs and stuff that'll run against that. So that has to be tempered glass. Sliding glass doors, obviously, they're all tempered glass because we use those. And, framed and frameless glass doors, like the shower, shower doors and shower panels, those all have to be safety glass. And then timber glass must be used if the window area is greater than 9 square feet. Wow, that's pretty big. What's that? Well, that's only 3 by 3, right? That's still, that can't be right, huh? Oh, if all of those conditions are met, yeah, I was gonna say, those windows are bigger than 3 feet, 9 square feet. If the top glazing is more than 36 inches above the ground, if the lower edge is 18 inches from the ground, so those are special things, but if all of those are true, you have to use safety glass. And then there's a pathway. If there's a pathway next to a window, it has to be safety glass. So if you live in a development that's got just a little path between the fence and your window, those windows have to be safety glass. They should be. I don't know that they always are. Nowadays they don't allow that little 3 feet between your fence and the house, right? Usually the setback. So, but these are older houses. If there's just enough to go through there, you're squeezing through, you might fall into it. So that's just what the code says about that. And then. U factor. So I always wondered what R value actually meant. Sometimes they can make standards and they just adopt a value, let's say between 0 and 1, or between 1 and 100, and there's great things within that. But this actually has an engineering thing. If you look on page, well, it says 5, I don't know, it's somewhere in there, but it's a couple of boxes of information. 25? No, 5. But look for those 2 boxes. Does U factor in windows or heat loss at glass? Everybody there? So U factor, the U factor in when they describe windows is the rate of heat flow through a material, specifically British thermal units. Now, this is physics. British thermal units per hour per square foot at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a volume of heat, right? That's very specified. British thermal units is a specified amount of heat. So U factor tells you what that is. Like if it's 0.32, that's a certain amount of BTUs per hour going through a square foot in an hour at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's where it comes from. And then R value is just 1 over that. So R value does come from a meaningful engineering equation. It's just that we never think about it. We just rate things with R value. We know what the government tells us. We have to have an R19 or R20 wall, an R30 ceiling. That's all we need to know about it. It's not even. Almost done, guys. Let's see anything else. Oh yeah, on 24, which is a couple pages beyond that, it's got the Robbins answer to the question, what kind of radiation? It's got those described. They're actually on a spectrum above electromagnetic spectrum, right? So it's wavelengths of these photons, these light particles. And if they're ultraviolet, their wavelengths are less than 380 nanometers. I know you don't want to know that. Who wants to know that? But that's how we get those. That's the difference between those lights. They're just different frequencies, and our bodies respond to that differently. Our bodies won't get skin cancer from visible light or infrared. It just doesn't react to it, but it will react to ultraviolet. That's the one that does it. And it's just because that's the wavelength that affects our skin for accidental reasons. So, oh yeah, low E coating. That's the last thing I forgot. So on this page here, It's got a window cutaway. So there's 4 sides, double pane window means there's 2 panes of glass, there's 4 possible sides. You don't wanna put E-coating, it's a spray metal. You don't wanna put it on the either outside one because people will touch it and wipe it off and they're always cleaning that. So it won't last, so you don't ever put it on there. So you got a choice, at least for double pane, triple pane, there's more choices, but double pane, you're gonna put it on the outside, the inside of the outside piece. Or the outside of the inside piece, 2 pieces on the inside, they're facing each other, right? And they call those, this just gives you the number. Surface 1 and surface 2 are the ones we're talking about. And then, no.
Yeah.
No, surface 3 and surface 2. The arrows are wrong. I remember last time.
The arrows are wrong.
Yeah, surface 4 is the inside, that's true. The bottom one, right? The arrow points to the thing. 1 should be the outside, so that arrow should stop on the outside of the window. It goes through the window, so the arrow's drawn wrong on surface 1. Okay, it's surface 2 and 3. And surface 3 looks like it's on the inside of the piece of glass it's going through, so that's a little hard to see, but 1's definitely drawn wrong. The arrow should stop on the outside of that window. But anyway, when you order this, if you get to a point where you're ordering windows for your company, you have to specify all this crap on the window, low E coating, blah, blah, blah. And so they're gonna ask, they're gonna have a thing that says what surface of the 2 panes are you gonna put the low E? So you have to know what they are. So when you get to that point, you'll have this little cheat sheet next to you and you say, oh yeah, well, I want such and such on surface 4 or surface 3 rather than such and such on surface. Only surface 2 and 3 get treatment. Now, when it's such a science now that windows do many things. So you can put a low E coating on the outside, on the inside of the outside pane, which I guess is surface 2, and that'll keep solar gain from coming in. So if you live in a hot area, you want to put that on there. Less of that solar gain comes through. However, if you're trying to use passive solar, you want that heat to come through. But like I said, you've got, like we talked about last week, you've got to have a thermal mass to absorb the heat. If you just let heat through with no thermal mass, it's going to heat up your room, so it's unbearable. Like most of our rooms in the West in the summer. So you've got to figure out what your house design. If it's not passive solar, then you can just go with where you want the heat to be. You know, all of these will keep the heat from going out better. They also block the heat from leaving, so they help with the insulation that way. So and then on the north side, you're not getting solar gain because the sun's coming from the south. So on the north side, you can put a lot of low E stuff to keep the heat from going out. You don't care about it coming in because there's no sun there anyway, right? So for a whole house, you might have 5 windows this way, 5 windows this way, 5 windows this way. So it's become an art now how to do this. So look at the bottom of the back of that page. It's got a set of blinds, and then below it's got some diagrams. Look at those diagrams on the bottom. On the coating, on the left-hand one, that's surface 2, the inside and the outside. And it's going to stop solar heat gain, but it's also going to stop a little bit of visible light. So you can see the thickness gets less as it goes inside. So that's just showing that you can't have them both. You lose a little bit of the light. And I've taken windows and they make them so good now that it's really hard. They're not gray or blue or really obvious. In fact, you have to have, if you take one of those windows and open it up so you can see right through blue sky, without anything, they're not that, you can see a little bit of tint, but they're not that different. They're getting really good. And then the one on the right has a lot of low E because it's trying to get rid of a lot of that solar heat. See how much is reflected from that? But at the same time, a lot of the visible light is cut off. So those are just trade-offs you have to figure out. And we're very near the end. Yeah, actually, the first stuff we've already done. Okay. Question. The book, oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Okay, I have 144 in the book. What is that? Oh, yeah, 144. See the can on the bottom? So when we had gaps around windows, and you put gaps, you make the rough opening, the framing bigger than the window. Anybody know why?
For expansion?
No, windows don't expand too much. The wood fight. I know it's an okay guess. Yeah, 2 reasons. Ease of installation, you don't want to be fighting something to get it in. And then also, if the framing is at all not plumb, you want to be able to tilt the window a little bit so it's plumb. So if you have a little gap, you can manipulate a little bit that way. And it happens. I mean, if you guys work for a long time, you'll see every kind of frame to put a window in. But so we use the stuff fiberglass insulation, which is useless because it compresses it so it doesn't work. But that's what we used to do. Now, then the spray can became operative. And now you just spray like in that picture, all the things, and they make special ones for windows that don't expand so much that you crimp the window. And it's really hard. They got all these different kinds of cans. That's great. Okay, so you're too unruly to look at this last YouTube. So I'm saving it for the day, one of the days we have here. We might have to come inside to see it. There's a couple things. It was about the proper way to flash a window. And even though we did it in 124, we're gonna do it again because it's really important how you flash windows to keep the rain out. If it's done, because the biggest problem of callbacks, the biggest cause for callbacks in Santa Barbara is window leakage, which means they weren't flashed right, properly flashed. So we'll go over it. We got a YouTube, but we're too tired, so we'll go over it on a catch-all day when we catch all the stuff we need to do. You know, you guys owe me another half hour, but I can tell you're gone. So there's no reason.
Hey, just by the
At this point,
end of
Okay, so I just want to make you guys guilty and owing me, so that when I ask you to do something later, I'll say, remember, because I let you out a little early, you're gonna. So I have to say, listen, Saturdays again are required unless there's family issue, sickness, or work. You have to work. Otherwise, you need to come. Some of you haven't been coming. And I know some of you work. I know some of you work. I know some of you work. And I'll just trust that, you know, if you're working, that's fine. Or you can be late for that reason too. But I want to thank everybody. Last week, it was a pretty good turnout. We went to Ferguson's and we walked on campus. That was good. That was a good section.
Yeah, it was a good sign.
It was good because when we talk, we could talk about things, you know, building, but also other things. So I thought it was fun. So this week we'll go to my house. I have some pizza and Cokes. Can't have beer because I get in trouble. If you guys got in an accident after drinking a beer, I get fined. We don't do that. My party, we have a party at the end of school that can't go down the block with the beer. I wish we could. Anyway, so if you can make it Saturday, well, it'll be fun. Well, you know, 145, same as you. Did anybody come in late and didn't get the field trip?
Oh, yeah?
Everybody.
Okay, so what time, at 1:45?
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
So you're on the freeway going for Santa Maria.
I could be here.
And after Costco is Winchester Canyon.
Yeah.
Get off on that. Instead of going right on Winchester Canyon, off, take on the off ramp, stop around the off ramp, and just go straight.
Just before you go, right, because I'm gonna come up
Second
work.
right,
I'm gonna be hungry.
third right, all right.
Oh, that's okay.
You get a terrain.
This is where, they got, the.
Oh, is it right here? Yes. All right.
It's my house. Are you done setting? You got good for me.
No, I'll let you use it.